This is the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast session number 67, Peter Blum on Neuroplastic Healing.
Welcome to the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast with Jason Linett, your professional resource for hypnosis training and outstanding business success. Here's your host, Jason Linett.
Welcome back. It's Jason Linett here with a very, very fascinating session. And I would very briefly reference, there's a principle in business that of running the applications of how you reach out to your audience, your potential clients, as being that of a dog whistle. And what I mean by that is imagine for a moment, to apply a little bit of our good friend hypnotic metaphor, you're at a dog park, and you have a trusty dog whistle that apparently only dogs can hear, yet I can hear them, and they're kind of annoying. Though it's this moment where you blow that whistle, and maybe there's 2 or 3 dozen dogs there at the dog park, but maybe only 4 or 5 of them come running over to you. So I'd reference that in advance, because when you listen to this conversation I'm about to have with Peter Blum, there's some themes that we're going to start off on that it may be too easy for some of you to go, that's not for me. Though what I want you to hear in terms of these concepts of shamanic healing, these concepts of healing through sounds, everything is grounded through science. Everything is grounded from a real-world approach to how we actually interact with our clients. And I love, though, the aspect of not necessarily using these modalities with every single client. So back to that dog whistle principle, this is how, as a business strategy, my hypnosis business is called Virginia Hypnosis because I'm in Virginia and I do hypnosis. And to look at that website, I'm positioned as a generalist. I see smoking cessation, I see weight loss, I see fears, I work with people with medical issues, which definitely listen through this podcast session because Peter and I get very heavily deep into working with clients with medical issues. So it's that statement that not every marketing piece that I would put out would be a match for everybody. And that's intentional. Yet it's allowing those people that hear the message that they need to hear to rise to the surface, raise their hand, and express that they are interested, and then reach out, make the contact, and then get the help that they absolutely need. So this brings us full circle to this concept of neuroplastic healing. And I reached out to Peter as I saw that he and former Work Smart Hypnosis podcast guest Michael Ellner, session number 3, are doing a pre-convention offering up at the NGH convention this year, August 2016. And all the details of that are over in the show notes at worksmarthypnosis.com. So Michael, who I've known for years, Peter, who I've been getting to know in more recent years, and reading over the content, and really just from my own fascination and enjoyment wanting to have a conversation about this as well. And I'll tell you, you're about to hear us jump into themes of sharks and Pac-Man and singing bowls and just covering a whole wide range of strategies, which just simply, I'll tell you now, just simply listening to this conversation, it will inspire you to help your clients in even better ways. So let's jump right in. This is session number 67, Peter Blum on neuroplastic healing. We usually kick off by playing origin story. So just kind of kick us off. Tell us a little bit of your entry into hypnosis, how you first got introduced to it.
Okay, well, go back in time to the years 1985. I'm in my late 30s and working whatever I can do to support a small family. Used to tell people I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And I was a journalist at the time. I had been involved in a lot of metaphysics, yoga, meditation, various forms of spiritual pursuit, but I was writing a series of articles for a local paper on alternative forms of healing. A lot of things that are now mainstream and accepted and are even in some cases insurance reimbursable were just starting to get more popular. So I interviewed a chiropractor and an acupuncturist and someone doing shiatsu. And I part of the research was that I got sessions in all these modalities. So then I got a call from an old friend, person I had known from like 10 years before, named Richard Zarrow. And Richard had gone out to California about 4 or 5 years before and had just returned back to my hometown here in the Hudson Valley of New York State. And Richard said, I am practicing Ericksonian hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming. I saw the series of articles you're writing. I think what I'm doing would fit in well. And I had no idea what he was talking about. I didn't know what Ericksonian hypnosis or neurolinguistic programming were, but I went over and interviewed him. And it was fascinating. And even with a lot of experience with meditation and different forms of playing with consciousness, I had never really had any direct experience with hypnosis and had very, very limited frame of reference. And so Richard talked a lot through a bunch of books and articles at me. But the best thing about it was, since I was doing experiential research, he took me to his office and he put me in a chair. He had this chair that was made by Panasonic. It was called the Getaway Chair. And it was a luxury recliner with built-in, rollers that go up and down the acupuncture points on either side of your spine, and footrests that vibrated, and wings with speakers in them that you could put a cassette tape, that's what we were using at the time, cassette tapes, in and here, and he put a cassette tape in of something called a double induction. Two people telling two different stories at the same time, one in either ear. And then he put headphones and goggles on me that were hooked up to an early version of what we now call, alpha theta brainwave machines. And he plugged those in, and he left the room. Basically,
well, it sounded like the chair was already doing a lot of the work for him too. On top of it,
between the chair and the cassette tape and the goggles and the headphones, I was gone. I later found out this is a technique that we might call overload. I had certainly more than 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information coming in at the same time from all of my senses, and the two voices were telling a story that was, to induce a state of relaxation and to excite the imagination, and it was a fantastic experience. So that was great, and but I said, I'm still curious. I said, Richard, that was like, I need to come back and talk to you some more. And I came back the following week for the second part of my interview, and I said, well, that was wonderful. I recognize that state. It's not an alien state. I had thought hypnosis would be something totally different. I said, it's not all that different from states that I've experienced on my own in meditation or deep concentration or kind of. He said, exactly. I said, and you didn't do anything. And he said, yes, exactly. So he was really introducing me to the idea that a lot, self-hypnosis, all hypnosis has a self-hypnotic component. The hypnotist and the model that I use is the facilitator, the guide, but really they're engaging your imagination so that you can make changes and see things differently. So I said, well, that was great, but what would I use it for? And he said, anything you like. And I thought, well, at that point I was a lot more arrogant than I am now. And I said, well, I really don't have any problems, but I am an avid tennis player. Could I use it to improve my tennis game? And he said, absolutely. So we did a second session that had no chair, no goggles, no headphones, where I stood and he did something that I later learned was more related to an NLP anchoring of excellence technique, and helped me create an association with a particular word and posture of entering into a state of excellence that was associated with playing tennis. And then I went out that week and I played tennis, and I beat people that I had never beat before. And it just all seemed very dreamlike, like the ball was, twice the size as usual, and I was moving, everything was in slow motion. I had all the time I needed, and, I marched back into his office a week later, and I said, okay, I'm a believer. I don't know what this stuff is, but it works. Within 6 months, I wrote the article. Within 6 months, as fate would have it, I had reached that point that there's a metaphor that's sometimes used in corporate coaching about putting a frog You know about the frog in boiling water?
Yeah, that it'll eventually it'll jump out if it's hot, or it'll stay in until it's too late.
Right. If you put a frog in a pan of water, so they say that's cold, and slowly heat it, the frog will boil to death. If you throw a frog into a pan of water that's already boiling, it will hop right out. So I was in a situation where I was slowly boiling to death, and I needed to leave, and it was, I couldn't figure out where to jump. So my friend Richard said, look, why don't you do what I do? I'll train you. I think you'd be good at it. You're natural. I'll train you, and I'll bring you into my practice. And my practice is so busy that I need someone to download some of the excess clients to. And I also need someone, business is booming, I need someone to manage the office for me. So for the first year while you're my intern in training, you can run the office and I'll pay you to do that. And I said, this sounds like the proverbial offer that I can't refuse. And that was in 86. So I'm actually celebrating 40 years in the profession, which seems extraordinary. 96 or maybe it's 30 years. That's right. My math is a little off. 30 years. But that's still a really long time, 30 years to be doing something. I never did anything for longer than 5 or 6 or 10 years. So 30 years of doing this, and I love the field. I love the work. I hope that I can continue to do it for a while longer. I worked with Richard for about 3 or 4 years, and then we parted ways, and I went off, and I've had a private practice ever since, and I've been an instructor for the NGH since 1993, so I have trained hundreds of people, and I also enjoy that part of it, and I think that's it.
Yeah, I love that. And I'd share one of the reasons I reached out to you is just the fascination that you're somebody from many different modalities, many different approaches. I mean, even to browse your website, it transitions along the sidebar from NLP to hypnosis to sweat lodges and shamanic healing and singing bowls. And I'd ask you, how much of this would you say is putting variations upon a similar theme and just attaching different terminologies? Really, how much of a barrier would you put between these different modalities, these different approaches that you have a passion and background in?
Not a heck of a lot of a barrier, I mean, one of the quotes that Erickson, who is my personal hero, even though I never met him, I've studied his work and his writings and watched films of him and about him. And in one of them, there was a sociologist, an anthropologist, who was saying, Dr. Erickson always encouraged me to study the trances of the people in Brazil and in Bali as an anthropologist, when people would be playing music and dancing and go and be possessed by spirits and go into a trance and stab themselves and not be hurt. And, he said it was the same phenomenon, but from a different psychosocial context and different cultural context. And that always stuck with me. It's my own curiosity that has led me, my own passion, where it takes me, and I seek the inclusive. In NLP they talk about meta programs, and I seek the inclusive one. What is the connective thread between all the things that interest me? I think everybody kind of does that, and so my own particular stew or goulash, and we all cook it up. And I encourage people, if you're coming from a dance background, then think about how dance works with hypnosis if you're studying hypnosis. If you're coming from a linguistics and you speak several languages, think about the language component of hypnosis. There's always, movement, language, whatever, sports, what states of excellence in sports, whatever. So I've been a musician all my life, and I've also been profoundly affected by teachers coming from indigenous shamanic and medicine person settings, tribal people. And I put together something a few years ago called Where Three Rivers Meet. And it's a training that I've done a couple times, which is the braid, the idea of a braid, which is with hair, you take three streams and you're sort of crisscrossing them and making them into one stream. And so the braid for me is these three rivers meeting, and those being hypnosis, shamanic perspectives, and sound healing. And I do employ all of them. When people come to see me, I have a couple different business cards. The one that I've been handing out longest just says, medical and clinical hypnosis. And the other one that I started giving out later has a picture of singing bowls, and it says sound healing, shamanic interventions, and it lists among my credentials that I'm certified, an interfaith minister. So again, if somebody comes to me for hypnosis, I might not talk about those things, but I might. I want to feel out who's coming to see me, and if that's something that they are amenable to, leaning towards, have knowledge of, have curiosity about. Otherwise, I may alienate them, and that's never the intention, right? You want to make it comfortable for people. So if I get somebody who's very medically, scientifically oriented, I'm probably not going to take out my drum or my singing bowls and my owl wing. but you never know.
Right,
they're all sitting. They're sitting there around my room. If people come into my office and they see I have some gongs and drum and whatever, if they ask questions, I follow where their attention goes.
Tell me about a time where perhaps, maybe from the initial phone conversation, you would have thought incorporating these sounds would not have been appropriate, but then maybe you followed that hunch and it found to be the right choice.
Can't think of anything specifically off the top of my head, but what I will say is that in the last half dozen years, I've been working more with, in the sound healing work, more with tuning forks. And tuning forks are nice because they're tuning forks. They're not something from a strange, exotic culture. They're not alien. It's a tuning fork, and people are familiar with them. And I can explain it in terms of, these tuning forks are tuned to a particular number of beats per second, and they vibrate in that way. And there's a scientific explanation for how I can use them to tune your brain. And it's based on the principle of entrainment. Now, that's the same principle as shamanic journeying uses, although a lot of people who use the drum for shamanic journeying might not know that, because I was curious when I got involved with that, and that's a form of exploration of consciousness for healing and guidance that was popularized by an anthropologist named Michael Harner, who wrote a book called The Way of the Shaman. And it involves lying down and somebody playing a large frame drum with a very regular beat. And I started studying this in the late 80s, right around the same time as I was learning about hypnosis. And it was interesting. I had a foot in each world, and I'd go and I'd work in Richard's office, and he'd have these goggles and headphones that were, people would put on, and it's very scientific. Well, it's goggles and headphones. It's electronically produced pulse, light, and sound. It's technology. It's a machine. So it's within the parameters of the Western scientific approach. And then I'd go in the evenings over to get together with my buddies and tie bandanas on and lay on the ground. Somebody would play this drum, and we'd journey. And that's what they call it, shamanic journeying. We'd go and we'd meet our spirit guides. And the beat of the drum is very regular, and it kind of goes like this. It's not a syncopated beat. It's just a very regular beat. And I was so curious. And, the brain waves, just for our listeners who aren't familiar, this is what biofeedback is based on.
Yeah.
And the whole science of neurofeedback, and that our brain is always generating electrical energy, and it's in different frequencies, and those frequencies correspond with our state of consciousness. So if you're normal waking state is most people are walking around conversing and conducting business. And if you hook them up, you'd find they were in beta. Beta is the fastest state. It's 12 to 25 cycles per second. And the next slowest one down is alpha. Alpha is 8 to 12 cycles per second. That's, spacing out, daydreaming. If you yawn, if you close your eyes, you go into alpha for a few seconds. We all go in and out of alpha many times during the day. Lighter stages of trance, early phases of meditation, people would be generating alpha in biofeedback. You learn through feedback, through seeing a light go on or a sound go off from electrodes that are hooked up to your body to calibrate this. Say, oh, okay, so I'm in alpha. So alpha is good. Theta is even more interesting. Theta is 4 to 7 cycles per second, and that's the state that corresponds with deeper states of hypnosis and deeper, more experienced meditators who plateau in alpha and then drop down into theta. So 4 to 7 is that's the hypnagogic state. That's the state in between waking and sleeping where we have insights and breakthroughs and new ways of understanding, aha moments. It's a good one. And the delta is the deepest one. That's 0.5 to 3.5 cycles per second. So the light and sound machines generally start people out in beta, and then with pulsed light and sound, and because of a principle called entrainment, which says it's a general overall overarching principle in physics that says that two objects that are oscillating close to the same frequency, if brought into proximity, brought close together, will tend to vibrate, will match. It's sometimes called the frequency following effect. Mm-hmm. So the brain is producing these frequencies, and if you suggest to it through pulsed light and sound, let's slow down. We started in beta, let's slow down into alpha. As the light and sound slows down, the brain will go along with it. And so it's a way of just very naturally, organically moving a person into a deeper state, into a more contemplative state. So I'm curious. This is back in 1988, and I take the drum and I take my wristwatch off, and I'm watching the second hand go around, and I'm playing the drum, and it's about 280 beats per minute, and I divide that by 60, and I'm like, that's between 4 and 5 beats per second. Hey, that's theta. How about that? Could that be that these ancient medicine people and shamans intuitively, without having the EEGs or the oscilloscopes or anything to hook up to the brain, they intuitively knew that certain rhythms were more conducive to people going into a contemplative hypnotic state?
That's where I go back to the word modality, that we look at the word modality, and we'd often look at hypnosis as a modality. Some would even separate NLP as being its own separate modality or anything else of this nature. And to look at it as that word involving just, let's call it transportation, we're often arriving at that same place in the mind. There's just a different way to get there. Exactly. And, I'm going to Kansas City, and I might take a train, I might take a plane, but if I have to walk, I'm going to get there just the same. So this is great, and this was a revelation for me. And so using the drum for people who are open to that is fine. But again, I don't want to, I want to be in rapport. I want to make it safe. I want to make it comfortable up to a certain point. There are some people where it's good to push their boundaries. You want to introduce something a little exotic, a little magical, a little exciting. They like that. But for a lot of people, you don't want to freak them out. So tuning forks do the exact same thing, but they're tuning forks. They're what's used to tune a guitar or a piano. They're very safe. And so I have now a set of 5 tuning forks. They're called the Brain Tuner set, and they're tuned so that there's a fundamental, and then there's 4 different forks. And what happens when you strike 2 of them and you hold one up to each ear is that the brain perceives the difference tone. It's a binaural, what do they call it, phenomena. Mm-hmm. Binaural phenomena. Binaural means 2 ears. We have 2 ears, and so we hear things through 2 ears. And if I hold a fork that's vibrating at 256, which is a little C, 256 beats per second,
by one ear, and then one that's vibrating at 270 by the other, 270 beats, the brain will perceive the difference, 14 beats per second, which is in the beta state. And then if I hold one, the 256, and one that's 265, well, that's 11. And, so I can ramp it down so that it's perceiving a slower and slower frequency. And as it does so, it matches step just as it would with the drum or the alpha theta brainwave machine. So it's tuning forks. And I find that it's very easy to transport. I just stick them in my pocket and pull them out. I say, here's some tuning forks. This is pleasant. And I give the people a 5-minute explanation, just like I did now, about entrainment and the brainwave frequencies. And I said, but you don't really even need to know about this. Now, for some people, it's a good overload technique. You start talking about this stuff, right, Jason?
Yeah.
You follow me? You start talking about, brainwaves and frequencies.
It serves as a bit of a confusion induction for some.
And binaural, and they're like, whatever, just hit the damn fork, let me listen to the sound.
Either just ask for eye closure at that point or just yell the word sleep. It's either going to...
Yeah, and I say, and you don't have to listen to me, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to understand. If the inquiring minds want to know, if you like to know about this stuff, fine, but otherwise, here's the good thing about this. You don't have to understand it for it to work.
And I'll tell you what I'm loving about this is that it's a category that far too often people would be a little critical of. They'd start to cast judgments and assessments on it before they even know about it. Though for the listener, participating in this, hear that everything is coming from a place of research and science, which is kind of how I want to transition us over to working with our clients about the mindset of creating new neural networks, this whole concept of neuroplasticity, which is one of the biggest buzzwords of, just to bring it into the process of working with a client. How would you kind of characterize if there is like an overriding goal, if there's overriding themes that carry into a session as someone's there sitting with Peter Blum, the hypnotist?
You are far more powerful than anybody has ever told you or you've ever let yourself believe.
Now, is that about me or is that for your client? Because I'll take the compliment.
Exactly. We'll leave it.
Interview's over. You're on the homepage of the Work Smart Hypnosis website. Thank you.
We'll leave it.
Sorry, go ahead.
What do they call it? Delightfully vague or something like that. Deliberately
vague,
ambiguous, artfully vague. But that every person can benefit from having somebody in their corner who absolutely believes in them and is telling them you can do whatever you put your mind to. You can't even begin to imagine what is possible for you. Don't let the limitations of others' limiting belief systems keep you from attempting. Tony Robbins, who a lot of people have mixed feelings about, the guy took NLP and he ran with it.
Yeah.
He made it its own. He built an empire and he helped tons of people.
I'd always point out it's kind of like that moment where this was before I was born, though quite familiar with the history of the movie of Monty Python's Life of Brian, where people were protesting it and they hadn't even seen the movie. I think most of the critics of Tony Robbins haven't actually interacted with his material.
Yeah. Right. So Tony Robbins says, what would you attempt if you knew you could not fail?
Yes.
If I gave you a written guarantee that you could not fail, what is it that you've never even allowed yourself to consider? So, this is opening up horizons of possibility. We don't know. I mean, Michael Elner and I are together. We've known each other for 20 years or at least, and we've co-taught together, and we both are great believers in the empowerment of others. That through learning hypnosis, through experiencing hypnosis and self-hypnosis, it opens up a panoramic view of what is possible. Maybe you've been looking through tunnel vision for years. Robert Anton Wilson, who's a great writer and thinker, he was, I don't know if he coined the term, but he talked about, your reality tunnel. And it's like you're looking down this tunnel, and that's your reality. And there's so many other ways of looking at things in Transformations, which is a wonderful book that I recommend to all my students, which is transcripts of Grinder and Bandler's early seminars on hypnosis in NLP.
And I will definitely link to that over in the show notes, because to find the original, it's now out of print, and classically, I've had students be able to grab copies for like $25, though. The challenge is there's a lot of books.
They can contact me, and I will send them a PDF. All right? No, seriously. Yeah. But, in that book, they said, if you could just for 1 second be inside someone else's mind and consciousness and perceptual reality, it would be more powerful than the most powerful psychedelic drug you could put your hands on. You would be on such an altered reality trip, because we're all thinking, this is how things are, and everybody's wandering around with their own, we have no clue what somebody else's worldview or reality or reality tunnel is. So this idea, we're coming historically out of the age of Descartes and the mind-body split and the body as machine, and in the 70s and 80s, there was tremendous groundbreaking research. And I was very fortunate because my first instructor, my mentor, Richard, the fellow I mentioned before, Richard Zarrow, was really into this. And I have in front of me an article that he wrote in the spring of 1989. And I just want to quote a little bit from it, because it bears directly on what we're talking about, neuroplasticity. He says, recent scientific mind theories use the metaphor that the mind is a kind of biocomputer, taking and processing mental image pictures called holograms. These images have been found to change the emotional and physical structure of the body, and even objects outside of it. For example, Penn State psychologist Howard Hall took blood samples from a group of subjects and established their white blood cell count. White blood cells are our first line of defense against invasion of foreign bodies. Then Hall taught his subjects self-hypnosis, also called variously autogenic training, progressive relaxation, guided or creative visualization. Asked them to imagine their white blood cells as hungry, powerful sharks devouring the cancer cells. Children were asked to imagine Pac-Man. Remember Pac-Man?
Yeah.
Well, some people do. Pac-Man traveling through the body, through the bloodstream, eating bad cells. An hour later, Dr. Hall took their white blood cell count. It had risen on the average from 13,508 to 15,192. A week later, it was 18,950. Hall commented that for some inexplicable reason, the mind can influence the body by changing the biochemistry of the blood. I mean, that's what, 25 years ago, more? To be honest, the images of a hungry shark eating a bad cell or Pac-Man coursing around the bloodstream are ridiculously simple, perhaps even silly. And those silly pictures held before the mind's eye when the body has relaxed its muscles affect us almost instantaneously right down to the cellular level. He then goes on to say, imagine then what the impact is of our own self-image, the mental image picture of who we think we are, not only in the health of our bodies, but also in the quality of our lives and those we love. We carry around that picture of how we see ourselves, not for 24 hours of Dr. Hall's experiments, but 24 hours a day, day in, day out. So I would tell a personal anecdote here. I've worked with people with cancer, with tumors, and visualizing them. And you have to use the imagery I found. This is my IMHO, in my humble opinion. Mm-hmm. Everyone who says that is obviously not humble. But I have found that my belief is you need to use imagery that's comfortable for people. And so for some people, the idea of how this, like those are too aggressive, those images of sharks or if things eating it. So maybe just, like weeding the garden or whatever it is, whatever image is comfortable for them. But I've helped people using self-hypnosis and imagery to shrink tumors. I've helped people change their blood sugar level, change their blood pressure. I worked in a doctor's office in the 90s. I had a fellow, the doctors would refer people to me. And when they hired me, they said, we know what we do, and we're holistic in our approach, and we believe that every chronic condition has a stress component. And so we would like to have, we believe in a mind-body approach, and we need somebody in our office. We had somebody, they left. We need somebody to handle the mind part of it. We'd like to hire you. Can you do what you do without using the H word? I said, sure. This was in 1996, 97. I worked there for 2 years, and the sign on my door said, Peter Blum, Director, Stress Management Department. So they would send people to me, and the people would come, and they'd say, I'm not even sure what you do. Dr. Ken or Dr. Steve told me I should come see you. And I said, well, I'm going to teach you some body relaxation, some body scans, some progressive relaxation, some breathing techniques. Use your mind to visualize things, maybe work with examining your language, change how you express yourself, change it. Basically, I was teaching them self-hypnosis without ever using the word hypnosis. So I had a fellow came to me by referral from the doctors with high blood pressure, wasn't able to downregulate his blood pressure, and the guy was an engineer. So it was obviously a scientific mind. I said, okay, what I'd like to do is call the nurse and have her take your blood pressure before the session. The nurse, fine. Nurse came in, took his blood pressure. It was high. And I said, fine. And I said, so now I just want to talk to you for a while. And you close your eyes and listen. I don't remember how I started. Probably something about, focusing on your breathing and relaxing the muscles and, fairly standard stuff. And then I started talking to him about nature and about beavers. I said, beavers are the engineers of the animal kingdom. And I said that because the guy's an engineer. I figured he would relate to that. And beavers have the ability to build, dams. And it's amazing what they can do to regulate the pressure and how much liquid is dammed up and stored. But then there's also ways that they need to sometimes open up those passageways and allow the water, allow the liquid to flow through and create a better flow of, blah, 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 metaphors for, changing the pressure, changing the pressure. Blood is a liquid that's flowing through, an enclosed pipe, which is called, vein or artery, et cetera, et cetera. I never talked to him about his blood pressure. I talked to him about beavers. And he came out he said, I feel pretty good. And I said, let's call the nurse in. And of course, his blood pressure was much lower. So he said, well, how did that happen? I said, well, I didn't do anything. Obviously, you must have done something. Mm-hmm. So this was, he was a convert, and he came back for more sessions, and eventually he came to me and said, this is fascinating. I want to do this to help other people. And I ended up training him in hypnosis. And so as the Beatles song says, and so I left the police department, and I said, so you can have a wonderful career as the scientific engineer of the hypnotic world, and you can use all that scientific information and knowledge that you have in that kind of, left brain approach and help people with their problems. So anyway, I obviously believe in all this stuff.
Well, what's beautiful about that metaphor, there, just jump in for a second, is that we can look at it in terms of the whatever illness or disease may have also been going on being a direct metaphor, though at the same time, there's also just all of the residing stress, all the residual stress around having that issue. And if there is indeed a stress component that may have been causing it, it's that power of the hypnotic metaphor to really go in and address it from all of these various angles that, briefly, here's a client that I was with this morning that she came in, she's someone who I've seen a number of times now for weight loss. She's down a significant amount of weight, still has quite a bit of ways to go. Yet it's this place where going into like an extended control room process was the clear fit for it today, which we had done something like that a couple of weeks back. And it's this beautiful experience of we were going in and reframing occasional moments of what I can label as appropriate hunger, where, yeah, it's 4 o'clock, you could eat, but now you have that ability to wait till when it's the better time and make better choices, being the literal translation there. Though it's that beauty of the metaphor often may have unintended results, where I did not go into anything in terms of food choices in that meeting that day.
Right.
And that was her biggest takeaway, the way that we can hear a song and we hear a message that's what we need to hear, yet perhaps isn't what the person who wrote the song was intending.
Yes, yes. And, just to enlarge the scope of this, that there would be, in a different situation with a different client, I might be addressing, like, what are the causes of stress in your life? High blood pressure is a response to a situation. I mean, there are dietary aspects of it, exercise aspects of it, but a lot of it, white coat syndrome, person goes, their blood pressure's fine, they go into the doctor's office to have it measured, and they get nervous, and all of a sudden it shoots up. So it is, supposedly part of our autonomous systems, but it is directly affected by circumstance and by our thoughts and emotions. So if a person is not really good at responding to stressful situations in their life, and we all have them, they may need to learn some stress management techniques. So in that sense, the sign on my door was very accurate. It was about stress management. But sometimes I think why this story came to mind was several reasons. But one is we don't always need to, examine the history. There are a lot of people who are, you need to find out where this first happened, when did it, I don't believe that. I think sometimes you can just go right to the unconscious and help the person discover that we can regulate a lot of these things that we had been told that we couldn't, by images and by unconscious responses that we can then sort of delegate to you know how to do this now. Now you know how to do this, so just take care of it. And so anyway, so I obviously believed wholeheartedly in this. I'm a proponent of it. I teach to other people. Now flash forward to, 7, 8 years ago, I work a lot with this wonderful psychiatrist, my friend Dr. Louis Mel Madrona, who's the author of a number of books, Coyote Medicine being the best known one, but his most recent, we work a lot with story, and he's of Lakota and Cherokee descent. But he's a psychiatrist, and he's board certified in 3 different areas. And so we do a lot of workshops on storytelling, but he also teaches something called Cherokee bodywork. And so some years ago, he was giving a workshop locally on Cherokee bodywork. And now I mentioned tennis. This is a consistent theme, tennis player. And right around that time, I started feeling something I never felt my body. I started limping, and I started feeling pain in my right knee. A couple months before this workshop, Cherokee Bodywork, I had gone to see my doctor, and I had an X-ray, and he referred me to an orthopedic osteopath, and he took an MRI, and he said, "Oh, Mr. Blum, you have a torn medial meniscus." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And he showed me this, the film, and there it was. It was torn right in half. And I said, "Well, what can we do?" And he said, "Well, you can have surgery." And I said, "Well, I'm not so crazy about that. Let's wait a while and see, see what happens." But I was limping around, and I was concerned about, the future of my tennis career. And we're in this Cherokee Bodywork weekend, and we paired off, and we're working with another person, and this very wise body worker, a woman named Julie, was working on me, and she said, "What's going on with your body?" And I said, "Well, I have a torn medial meniscus. I can't, I sat cross-legged in half lotus pose in meditation for decades. I can't get my knee down far enough to do that. It hurts. I'm limping around on the tennis court." She goes, "Well, let's heal that. And I said, no, but you don't understand. It's torn. I've seen the MRI. I was there in the doctor's office. We can't. It's like I sounded just like my patients who are in that like stuck state. The stuck state that usually starts out with "I can't."
The danger of the word "because."
She looked at me, and she said, You're a healer, right? You work with people with hypnosis. I said, yeah. She said, have you seen people shrink tumors and heal from cancer? I said, yes. She said, so what? You're different? And she had me. In that moment, I realized I was somehow holding my own situation as being unapproachable. I thought, but this is science, and it's me, and it's a torn thing, and it's shredded. And she said, those Navajo blankets that get stitched together in it, just visualizes just joining and being stitched together. And she worked on me, and I went into trance on the bodywork table. And lo and behold, within a couple of weeks, it had stopped hurting. And I wasn't limping, and I was back on the tennis court. And a month later, or 2 months later, I realized I was able to sit in a cross-legged position, and I could get my knee down again. And that was 8 years ago. And it hasn't bothered me since.
Well, I mean, of all things, it's that experience of, I had 2 clients in the office last week, oddly enough, came in with the same story. And for one, that story of, because I'm now retired, this is going to be the easiest time in my life to get into better health. And the other one coming in, and because I'm now retired, this is going to be one of the most difficult times to get into health.
Right. So this is why I'm so concerned with story. What are the stories that we tell ourselves and actually convince ourselves are true? They're just stories. And if, I say, there are no bad people. I'm very optimistic. There are just bad stories. So helping somebody change, question their story, I mean, that's what this woman did. And I have a quote on my wall. I have a number of quotes that I keep up there to, sort of little ticklers that I look at them and I remember, oh, that's right. And one of them is from Erickson. It says, it isn't the amount of time, it isn't the theory of psychotherapy, it's how you reach the personality by saying the right thing at the right time. And she nailed me. She got me right at the right moment by sort of making fun of me. What, you think you're different? And I was like, no, Jesus, if I believe that other people can do this. And in that moment, something shifted. I went from, I can't change this, it's science, it's torn, to who knows what's possible.
Beautiful.
I work with shamans and medicine people, and you go into this liminal world with them. And you're talking about, calling in the spirits and having them move and change, reset bones and move muscles and who knows what's possible. Not everybody can go to that place. Not everybody's comfortable with that. If I say to somebody it's a metaphor, and if the metaphor works, fine. If not, let's go try a different metaphor. Let's try the metaphor of science. That's a good metaphor.
Nice.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got, and bringing this all full circle, there's a fascinating opportunity coming up that you're actually doing with Michael Ellner prior to the NGH convention, right?
Yes, we are we've got a one-day pre-convention workshop on neuroplasticity. And, I was just saying to you before we went on air that Michael and I have taught together many times. And this particular one, he put in the description. He put this together, and I said, fine, let's do that. And we put a few different ones in, and that was the one that NGH accepted. And so we're doing that one on, I think on Thursday before it starts, and neuroplastic approaches to creating health and well-being. And after it got accepted, I said, all right, well, Michael, what does this mean? What is neuroplasticity?
That thing that we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes. Oh, that name.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the word that I said, oh, so the mind can influence the body. And so this is, what I came up with here. It's the brain's ability to be flexible and to rewire in response to experience. That's it. The brain's constantly changing, not only in function, but in physical structure. So it changes itself in two different ways. One is by adapting to what's happening in the environment. So this is what we would call experience-dependent neuroplasticity. And we're going to think of this as sort of an automatic, unconscious process of conditioning. But then there's also, it changes by shifting and directing our attention, which is self-directed neuroplasticity.
So on one side, helping the client to produce the change, on the other side, giving them the capabilities and skills to continue on their own.
Yes, and the belief, that it is possible. A lot of people have been, hypnotized by, like that song, They Blinded Me with Science. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are hypnotized by their doctors, unfortunately, in negative ways. Like, oh, there's nothing that can be done about this. This is just, you're just going to have to learn to live with it. It's bad hypnosis. So we don't know what's possible. I read a lot of science fiction as a kid, and I was inspired by a lot of it. And one of my favorite short stories, this is a long time ago, was about the government called it top scientists together, a theoretical and practical physicists. And they said, this scientist was working on an anti-gravity device. And he was in its early stages, but he had gotten it to work, and he had made some films of his early experiments. And now remember, this is before CGI or anything. This is a story that was written in the 50s, maybe early 60s. It was long before computer-enhanced graphics and so forth, and special effects. So they said they had a 8 millimeter, 16 millimeter film, and they said, but unfortunately, there was a fire. The scientist died. All of his notes burned up. Everything burned. All we have is a fragment of this film. And the scientists all said that they said anti-gravity is impossible. Everybody knows that. There's no way. They said, yes, but look at this film. And they showed this portion of this film to these guys. And they scratched their heads and they went to work. And after a year, they said, well, we think actually now that we have figured it out, and we don't know how he did it because we don't have his notes, but we have figured out a way to duplicate what we saw in the film. And we have figured it out, and they demonstrated, and they had made their own anti-gravity device. And the government said, that's great, because that was all made up. That guy never existed. His notes never existed, and we constructed this film very carefully, using like optical illusions to make it look like something was powered by anti-gravity. They had to believe that it was possible. They had to believe that it had been done, and then they were able to do it. As long as they thought, no, it's not possible, violates the laws of physics, that was a stumbling block. They would never be able to do it. And we have examples of this over and over again. The very common one that's used is the 4-minute mile.
Yeah, I was about to jump in with that exact example that, oh, you can't do that. And as soon as someone did, then high school kids were doing it.
Yeah, everybody's doing it. Yeah. So, Michael has done a lot of amazing work with long-term survivors of AIDS. And he challenged the existing paradigm in the 80s, and when there was sweeping like the Red Death through certain communities, and the mantra that was going on in the background was AIDS is fatal, and Michael challenged that. And he said, there are long-term survivors. I want to meet them. I want to talk to them. I want to bring them to people's attention. That's, we need to focus on people who have lived for 20 years. I have a close personal friend who was diagnosed in 1999 with chronic lymphocytic leukemia. A few years later, he had a malignant nodule removed from his lung. He has melanoma. He has 3 or 4 different kinds of cancer. He's still walking around. He's very stubborn. There's some value in just saying, giving the finger to the established truth and saying, I'm going to make my own reality here. We can take that to extremes, and sometimes my reality collides with somebody else's reality, and something's got to give.
Yeah, it could be the NLP softener of the bold statement followed by, or not. Or I always tend to filter back to the, as a person who watched way too many infomercials as a kid growing up, there's gotta be a better way.
And that's not all.
Right. But wait, there's more.
Well, wait, there's more. That's another great catchphrase. So this is the world we live in. We live in a world where we've all been influenced by the commercials on TV, the movies, the pop culture, the songs that we listen to, the jokes we've told, the action movies, the superheroes. What I sometimes say, like, maybe you don't believe in animal spirits or guardian angels. Maybe you do. Maybe you do believe in guardian angels. There's an amazing community of people out there who believe that they've been contacted by aliens. There are people who work regularly with the ascended masters. That's their reality. I'm saying, great. So let's invite Jesus in. Let's invite the Archangel Metatron and Gabriel and have them come down, and Archangel Michael and the Kuan Yin energy of the goddess and the purple ray. And let's get with that energy, because these are words that we're putting around energies that we don't know how else to call them. So if that works for certain people, that works for certain people. But the trick is to get the client engaged in believing in being curious about what they can change.
It's about navigating out of that stuck state. So I'm sure the techniques that you and Michael are teaching in terms of, the bullet points here of the course about taking the suffering out of pain, improving immune function, and better techniques for managing stress. It's reminding me of, I'm in the middle of doing a session with a client, and I'm always one to highlight the statement that regression is not a method just only about finding the cause. We were doing a process all about, like an NLP model, pulling out resources and building anchors to revitalize those empowered states. And this wasn't the goal of the session that day, but she brought me to what she perceived to be past life. And it's the end of the session, and her only question was, did you bring me there or did I bring you there? And I just responded, well, here's the scope of how I do it, and the concept of those who teach regression, the line is never lead the witness, only using appropriate direction throughout the process. And again, we're going to an empowered moment, and her line on the way out was with a smile, well, that changes a few things. And I love that as a thought of just, the people who would walk in and to have the goal that every reason why this used to be a challenge, what if instead that now becomes every reason this is the right time for this shift to occur?
Yeah. What better time than now?
Exactly.
I mean, that's all we have is this moment. I know it's a cliche, but it's so true. It's all we have is this moment, and is it filled with I have a picture I'll maybe post it on my Facebook page or my website, but it's from a workshop that Michael and I did probably 15 years ago. I don't even remember what the title of it was, but written on the blackboard behind me is the phrase, opportunity is, and then the letters NOWHERE. And depending on how those letters are spaced, it either reads opportunity is nowhere or opportunity is now here.
Beautiful.
It's the exact same letters, but how close is that W and the H? Does it look like 2 words or 1 word? What right? So what do you want to do with the rest of your life, starting right this second? If you want to walk around feeling like a victim, welcome. You're welcome to do that. But I find it's not a lot of fun. I've been there. I've been resentful at circumstance or at my life or at the curveballs that have been thrown my way. It's of limited value to, rage against the dying of the light, like Dylan Thomas said. Do not go gently into that good night, but rage against the dying of the light. Well, sometimes, like my friend, being stubborn can keep you alive. You need to find out what the strategies are that's going to help you get to where you want to go. I don't have an agenda. My clients come in and I say, what can I do for you? What do you want? And as long as it's, legal and doesn't involve anybody else getting hurt. No, I'm serious.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
The sky is the limit. I say I'd like to become, I'm a really good gambler. And I go out and I gamble professionally. I go out to the World Series of Pokers. I just came back from Las Vegas, and I understand NLP teaches you how to read body language. And can you teach me how to do that? I already do it well. Can you teach me how to read the imperceptible, the tells that people? I was like, well, I'm not a gambler. I don't play cards, but I can certainly share with you what I do know, and you use it for whatever you want to do with it, but should you be going to Gamblers Anonymous? Is it a problem? If it's not a problem, then it's
I've got
not
to edit
a problem.
that one and say it's a problem if they're losing. I don't know if we label it a problem if it's working.
Yeah. If it's not a problem, it's not a problem. Right. If you have millions of dollars and you're losing tens of thousands of them gambling, so what?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, anything else that we haven't covered?
This is fantastic, yeah. And I'll link to your website as well as this upcoming training. Michael was on this program back on session number 3. So for those of you listening, we finally have a search function working once again on Work Smart Hypnosis. Just type in Elner in the top left search. That's ELLNER. Though we'll link to that in this session as well. Plus this upcoming training opportunity up in Massachusetts prior to the NGH convention. I love it because it continues that theme of, I love that you brought up stubbornness as being a positive resource where, we can say stubbornness in terms of not wanting to change, but there also can be that appropriate stubbornness of not accepting that sentence of, because you have this issue. I mean, I briefly reference being, I was 17 years old and was being told I had chronic fatigue syndrome. And maybe it was just the cynical 17-year-old brain hearing that, well, we diagnosed this because you have all of these symptoms, but you don't test positive for any of these conditions. And the cynical brain went, that's BS. And I felt better within the next week. So again, there's got to be a better way, and helping our clients to find that better way as well.
Every word, every concept has 2 poles. And, ordinarily stubbornness is thought of as a negative thing, but we can say, but somebody's very persistent. And that's not, it has a different spin on it, right?
Yeah.
I am, doggedly persistent in pursuing my goals. Well, that seems like a positive thing, right?
I'll take that.
Yeah. So, anyways, thank you so much for having me on the show, Jason. And
this has been fantastic.
People know the website is soundsforhealing.com, and come join us up in Massachusetts. I guarantee Michael and I we are sworn to fun. So you will have a good time as well as learn a lot of useful stuff in our one-day workshop. All right?
Thanks for listening to the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast at WorkSmartHypnosis.com.
Hey, it's Jason here, and thanks again for listening to this program. Thanks again for leaving your feedback over at WorkSmartHypnosis.com/iTunes. Head over to that page. That'll redirect you over to the iTunes listing. Leave your positive feedback there. I'd typically reserve this part of the program for a brief endorsement or a plug of one of my products, whether it's hypnoticworkers.com or any of my live trainings like the ones I do here in Virginia, or even online offerings like learnvirtualgastricband.com. Though I'd actually pivot for a moment and encourage you, this is launching in July 2016. And what I'd tell you is we are gearing up for an outstanding season of hypnosis conventions. And I refuse to look at any of it as this mindset of this event versus that event, because so far every event I've been to, whether it's the Hypnobirthing Conclave, whether it's Mid-America Hypnosis Conference, or we used to have an event actually in Charlottesville, Virginia, which Keith and Andy, if you're listening to this, do that again or let me know how I can help out. As well as, of course, the NGH convention in Massachusetts, as well as HypnoThoughts Live in Las Vegas. Outstanding opportunities to really jump in with both feet, get face time with some of the big names in the profession, the most dominant and prominent voices out there. So this really is a call to action to invest in yourself. Now, of course, I will throw in the plug. If you are going to HypnoThoughts Live, check out hypnoticbusinessmastery.com. That's the 2-day pre-convention offering that I'm doing just prior to the Las Vegas HypnoThoughts Live convention. It's the 6-figure blueprint for your success in terms of building, launching, and sustaining a profitable hypnosis business. Though whether it's my course, whether it's anyone else whose names you recognize, these are outstanding opportunities to improve yourself. Again, to reference another former previous Work Smart Hypnosis guest, it's all becoming rather incestuous here. Ron Esslinger, who on here, I believe, quoted that he goes to these conventions to remind himself how much he does not yet know. Even back to the recording with Melissa Tiers, she and I remarking how often we would have tables in the exhibit hall, and our tables are empty because we're attending workshops right along with you. So challenge yourself. Take outstanding classes. Highly recommend the one with Michael and Peter that we just spent some time talking about. Either way, stop by, say hello, and it'd be great to meet you in person. I'll see you soon. Hey there, it's Jason, and I want you to be one of the first to find out as we upload amazing new content. So do this right now. Click the subscribe button right here on this video. That's going to link you to our YouTube channel here, and you will be the first to find out as new resources and downloads are made available. Do it now.